question is, are any of my characters based on people I know? I do not ever write a character that is fully someone I know, but I use snippets of things. For example, Paul Jacobson. Paul likes to tell puns. My dad was a punster, so he's got that. My stepdad had short-term memory loss. So, not the same symptoms, but that was what inspired that aspect. Paul hates taking pills. He inherits that from me. I hate taking pills. So, I'll use little things like this, but most of the character is typically what I think is just right for that character. So there will be combinations of that. Much like subject matter, I'll take ideas I've seen in a newspaper or heard of that I'll blend in, but it's always a unique story that comes out. But the characters are unique characters, but you can find elements of people I know. Good question. Yeah, there was one here, and then I'll get yours.
What is your writing process?
Okay, what is my writing process? It has evolved. When I started writing, I made this decision in 2001. I was still working full-time. And I used a technique I came across. It was in the book called The Artist Way by Julia Cameron. How many of you have read that? Excellent. Highly recommend it. Those of you who didn't raise your hand, get that book. It's a very good book on creativity. And Julia has a concept called morning pages, which is first thing every morning, sit down and write 3 handwritten pages. And it can be anything. It can be your journal, shopping list, whatever you choose to write. But it's a way of getting the creative juices flowing for the day. I adapted that. What I did when I was working full-time is I would review where I'd left off the day before. First thing in the morning, I'd write 3 handwritten pages to continue my story. Then I'd go off to work, and when I came home in the evening, I would put those pages into the computer, doing an editing pass along the way, and that typically produced 2 typed pages. And if you do the arithmetic, if I stuck with it, in 150 days, I'd have a rough draft for a 300-page novel. This is how my first 4 books in the Paul Jacobson Geezer-Lit Mystery Series were written. Then, when I retired, being a morning person, I continued to write in the morning. It's just that I'd write all morning, and I'd write directly into the computer. So my process then became one of every morning, and I did this every morning. I wasn't giving a talk or had a family obligation. I would write all morning. And in the afternoon, I'm not good at writing, so I just would have that time I did it. Typically go out and get some exercise in the middle of the day, and then do editing and events and other promotional things in the afternoon. So this was my very prolific period because my wife and I had all of our kids out of the house. My wife's a night person. She'd sleep in, so the morning was quiet. And I had placed myself to write. And I wrote a lot of manuscripts during this period. And where I am now is my writing process is a little different at this point because we moved back to Southern California in 2015 because we had a grandson about to be born. And now the mornings are my time with my grandson. So that's number 1 priority. So what I'm doing now is I have, as I said, 16 published books. I have 15 completed manuscripts. And so I'm in editing mode on these other manuscripts. One will be coming out next month, which is a sequel to The Back Wing. It's called The Front Wing. And I have 3 with my publisher right now under review. And I have others that I'm working on and revising and editing that I will be preparing for the publishing process. So that's, the combination of how it has evolved. Okay? There was a question? Yeah.
Yeah, with all those rejections, did you think about looking into independent publishing, which is very inexpensive and very easy now, and a lot faster than spending 6 months writing query letters to agents who may or may not sell you work?
Yes, the question is about independent publishing, self-publishing, whatever you want to call it. And again, this is a very viable alternative now. If you go back 15 years, self-publishing was kind of a negative, but no longer. It's a real good opportunity. Of my books, the Tesla Legacy is independently published, it's self-published. And there are a lot of trade-offs we can talk about, and you're probably all aware of it, of independent versus traditional publishing. All of my other books have been through small or medium-sized traditional publishers. I always view that as one of the alternatives. And I view it also as a triage of looking at, there are three ways you can go. One is to get an agent to get into a large New York publisher. That's one path. Second is go directly to a small or medium publisher that will take things directly submitted from an author. And three is to go the independent self-publishing route. So all of those are viable. And I have some manuscripts that I'm sure over time I will choose to go the independent route. At this time, I've got a small publisher I like working with. I've had some good publishers and some bad ones along the way. I've worked with about 6 different publishers, and I've had some great experiences and some bad ones. So what I like about this particular publisher is they're very, very good people. They're doing good work for me, and they're small, so they don't have the exposure of a medium or large publisher, but they're meeting my needs right now in my writing career, and I'll be looking at other alternatives as I proceed. Yes, question back here.
Yeah, this is almost a follow-up to it. You mentioned that when you had an agent, they were not getting your work sold, but that you directly, by your agent, you directly went and started reaching out. I don't think that's a path that we hear a lot about. Can you talk about how a writer directly reaches out to those small and medium publishers?
Okay, so how do I reach out to these publishers? First of all, my first book, Retirement Homes or Murder, was sold through a pitch session at a writers' conference. Highly recommend writers' conferences. Some of you may have been there at the California Crime Writers Conference this summer. That's a great conference, a good way to meet agents and editors. And this was one in Denver, Colorado, called the Rocky Mountain Fiction Writers Conference. At that conference, they had a contest so you could submit your manuscripts. I submitted the manuscript for Retirement Homes or Murder for the contest. It did not place in the finalists for the mystery category, but they gave me a lot of really good feedback. And so I quickly did some revisions and strengthened my manuscript, so by the time I went to the conference, I had a lot of confidence in it. And I pitched to 2 agents and 2 editors, and one of the editors, Denny Dietz of 5 Star, liked the concept and told me to email in the manuscript. And 2 months later, I got an email back with a contract offer. So that was an overnight success after hundreds of rejections. So, that's the thing that you run into. Now, 5 Star, we had a good relationship. They published 9 of my books. Unfortunately, they decided to exit the mystery line. So they do have 1 line left, which is the frontier fiction line. My historical mystery is actually through that line, but I'm not currently writing any other historicals to submit to them. So then I had to find some other publishers. I meet people at conferences, I talk to them, and I found some other small publishers along the way. I actually found a publisher through LinkedIn, all crazy places, a small publisher. And then after 5 Star exited the mystery line, a small publisher was started by Eddie Vincent, who had been the person who did all the book covers for 5 Star. So I knew of him. We got together and decided we could set up a good working relationship. So he has now published a number of my books as well as my backlist. So as I got rights back from 5 Star, which were hardcover, now these are all issued now as trade paperbacks through Encircle Publication, which is Eddie Vincent's company. So those are some of the ways that I have found people along the way. And as I say, some good relationships and some not so good. Other questions? Yes?
Do you plot or are you a pantser?
Okay, plot or pantser? The eternal debate, right? I'm a plotting. Are you outlining or seat of the pantser? I use a basic outline, so I'm in between. I do a fairly brief outline, kind of sketching out where I think things are going to go. I always find that it meanders off into a new direction I wouldn't predict. I've tried detailed outlines, and so what works best for me is a basic outline. I do sometimes scene outlines, just words to describe a scene, how many scenes are going to be, how many chapters I think it will evolve to, but it then changes. What I like is having the basic idea, but as I'm writing, things change. And typically, with writing mysteries, I don't always know who the bad guy is. Many of my manuscripts is 2/3 of the way through before I discover who the bad person is, the villain, the killer. And that keeps me motivated because I'm trying to figure out it along the way. Then I go back and put more clues, red herrings, false clues in to round it out. But that's one way I keep energized. I wonder who did it. So I'll make a cast of suspects and then figure out which of them actually does it. Other questions? Going once? Oh,
I do. I have another one. So, I was really intrigued by your whole idea that you prepared to retire into writing. So, when you took those courses, what do you feel was the biggest takeaway from it? What did you really get out of them that's helped you in your new career?
okay, so what's the biggest takeaway when I took these courses? It was really the experience of being in a critique group, because the whole class was basically a critique group. We gave feedback to each other. It was a lot of fun for me because I was the old fogey there. In classes typically 19 and 20-year-olds who thought they knew everything about everything. So it was a lot of fun to do that. But it was gave good feedback about short stories, learning the craft, because again, I had no clue what I was doing. So it was just starting from ground zero. But as I started going to this writing conference in Colorado, the Rocky Mountain Fiction Writers Conference, they had tracks on craft, on selling your book, and on promoting your book. So I focused on craft at the beginning, then got into how to sell the book, which I was successful through the conference, and then focused on promotional things. So I continued to go to this conference every year when I lived in Colorado, because I always got new things out of it. But that initial class was really the experience of writing, forcing myself to write these stories. I had to turn in a short story every week. So you sit down and you write that, and then getting the feedback were all very helpful elements. Yes?
How do you promote your book?
How do I promote my books? Some of the things the basic things everybody needs. You have to have a website, social media. I like Facebook. I don't like Twitter, so I focus on Facebook. I enjoy giving talks like this, so I give a lot of talks. I give talks to service organizations, book clubs, libraries, and a variety of bookstores, a variety of organizations. So I focus on that. I have an email list I build up over time, and people add their name and address. So I always put out information about a new book to let people know about it. I put out postcards when a new book comes out. I built up a snail mail list along the way. So these are all things to keep my readers involved and aware of what's going on. I like going to conferences. I go to Left Coast Crime Conference every year. I go to VoucherCon periodically. I'll be going next year because it's in Sacramento. I go to Men of Mystery, which is a fun day at the Grand in Long Beach. And these types of things where I get to meet readers and make them aware of my writing. So those are some of the things I've chosen. Anything else? Well, thank you very much, and do stop up.